What's going on, everyone? Isaac Edelman here with Jose Salviati from the Peach Basket. Today's show, we will be previewing the Miami Heat's 2022 to 2023 NBA season. The Miami Heat are an interesting team as usual. They are always NBA Finals contender, but there are always storylines to add in with that conversation, with whether they will make the NBA Finals or not, whether they will win the championship. Not really conversations about whether they will miss the playoffs, but we'll get into all of that. I just want to introduce my co-host first. Jose, how are you doing? And just introduce yourself, because there's going to be Heat fans watching this, and I'm sure they will be interested about what you do.
Right on. Well, welcome to all the Heat fans. My name is Jose Salviati. As Isaac mentioned, I run a site called thepeachbasket.net. We're a site dedicated to passionate basketball fans. Isaac and I have known each other now for several seasons. He knows that I am a fan of the game, but I am a West Coast guy. My knowledge of the Heat really is more along the lines of what I read and what I know about the players that may have started out here in the West Coast. So I'm excited because I think that gives me an unbiased opinion. So don't get mad at me. I'm gonna come at you with what I think are facts about my thoughts on the Heat. That's me. That's who we are. Again, thepeachbasket.net, home for passionate basketball fans like Isaac and hopefully like you. Thanks, Isaac.
Yeah, of course. So let's get right into it. Let's start with the Miami Heat's projected starting lineup, right? First of all, when you're talking about NBA rosters, it's easy, right? It's not like the MLB or NFL or NHL. There's not a lot of players on a roster, right? But let's just break down the projected starting lineup for the Heat. So the Heat will have at point guard this year a longtime veteran, many-time All-Star, former NBA champion when he was on the Toronto Raptors, Kyle Lowry. This will be his second season with the Miami Heat. At shooting guard, Tyler Hero. We know who he is. He was Miami's sixth man last year. Again, this is the projected starting lineup. I wouldn't be surprised if the Heat have him as a sixth man this year. But again, this is the projected lineup. Shooting forward, Caleb Martin. He has been, Charlotte Hornets bench piece for the Heat last year. Looks like he might be that shooting forward position for the Heat. Power forward, we know him. He's Miami's star player, Jimmy Butler, arguably a top 10, maybe top 15 player in the NBA. He turns on a different kind of level in the NBA playoffs. We know that. In the regular season, he's good, right? He makes the All-Star games. But once the playoffs hit, he goes crazy. And then, of course, at center, potential defensive player of the year winner, Bam Adebayo. So that's the Miami Heat's top five. Jose, when you look at that, obviously there could be different players, and we'll discuss. But if that is Miami's starting lineup, what are your immediate thoughts?
First word that comes to mind is underwhelming. Now let me qualify that a little bit. All right. What worries me about the Heat is that they did literally, well, I won't say literally, but they did a whole lot of nothing during the offseason, right? Whereas the other teams in the Eastern Conference, the good teams, right, the teams that they're going to have to worry about, got better. I mean, almost across the board, they got better. So when you rattled off that starting five, I thought that's underwhelming, man. I mean, Jimmy Butler's incredible in what he did in 2020, because we can't forget this is a very, very good team. And Isaac, you hinted at that. They were in the finals 2 seasons ago. 2.5 seasons ago. They're good. They're solid. They're stable. They've got a great coach. They've got a great environment there in Miami. But at some point, right, I think even teams like Milwaukee that I think kind of fit in that same mold, right? They were in the finals. They won it. But they got a little bit better, right? They brought in some folks. Miami, whether it was that they couldn't or they didn't, I don't know. But it worries me because the only player there that I think is at that next level, and you alluded to, is Jimmy Butler. Yep. But even Jimmy Butler's got gaps, right? He's not the guy you want with the ball at the end of the game. He's not prolific 3-point shooter. So I see gaps in that team. Yeah. I really do. And I worry, right? I think what makes them so good is that they've been the same for 2-3 seasons.
Yes.
They know each other. They play really well together, and I think that's a measure for success in the regular season. And I think they'll be right in the mix again because they're very good.
Yeah.
But I just don't think that team. And when I say underwhelming, I say it in terms of winning it all, right?
Yes.
I think this team is gonna do great. I think this team is, could very well win the East again. But I just don't think the team, as presently constructed, with that starting lineup you mentioned, is gonna be enough to win it all.
Perfect. No, I respect that conversation. Now, this shouldn't make you feel a bit better, and I don't think you could describe this aspect of the team as underwhelming. Miami's depth, Miami's bench. Let's just break it down here. Miami's backup point guard will likely be Gabe Vincent. Gabe Vincent showed a lot of strides last year. He's undrafted. He went to UCSB, which is a small school on the West Coast. So there we go. I had to tie that in, Jose.
Yep.
But yeah, no, Vincent was a solid bench piece last year. Okay.
Mhm.
Look, every team has someone like that. Now let's get into the really strong players. Victor Oladipo and Duncan Robinson. Off the bench, that's impressive. First of all, let's touch on Victor Oladipo. He is finally healthy. He finally had a full offseason where he was healthy. No injuries. He is ready to go. He is at 100%. I don't know when the last time he was at 100%, right? He played last season, but I just still don't think he was at 100%, right? He came back. He might have been at 80%. He's at 100% now. Duncan Robinson, he struggled last year, but he's still a top 3-point shooter in the NBA, and coming off the bench will serve good because remember, he was in the Heat starting lineup a few years ago, and he's still young, right? It was just a matter of not being on track last year, but he had a full offseason. There was really nothing that changed. I mean, I think the concern was that he had a lot of struggling games last year where he only scored less than 10 points, and then he's no help on the defensive end, right? Maybe you'll take 10-point games if you get help on the defensive end. So that needs to be brought up. Also, Max Strus off the bench. Max Strus was lethal last year. He started in the playoffs. He was a very good 3-point shooter for the Heat, and he did his job. So that's really, Miami's depth at the, shooting guard position, point guard. Again, that's Oladipo, Vincent, Robinson, and Strus. When you discuss that, Jose, what are your thoughts? Personally, I don't see how you could call that underwhelming. Oladipo is one of the best defensive point guard, shooting guards, whatever you want to position him at. And Robinson is still a lethal 3-point shooter.
10, 15 years ago, the NBA was center dominated, maybe further back, maybe 20 years, right? There's the era of Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, right? Yeah. The era before that, Will Chamberlain, Bill Russell, going further back. It was center dominated. You had to be tall to win in the league. We started to see a shift, right? Today's NBA is less about the dominant center, the Shaquilles, the Dikembe Mutombas, and it's more about wing players, right? Yeah. You need to be a 3D guy. You need to be able to shoot the three and play good defense. What worries me, and I'm just putting on, I'm playing that devil's advocate here, really. Yeah. But what you mentioned with those guys, those are good guys, but none of them, to me, are 3-and-D guys. These are guys that are a liability, with the exception of Oladipo, right, on the defensive end.
Well, Oladipo's liability is injuries, but yeah.
True. Right, but he doesn't. He's a good defender, but the rest of these guys, are shooters, right?
Yes, only shooters.
They're going to go off, and that's great, and that's a huge benefit. But that's only half of what you need in today's game. You need to be able to play D. You look at a team like the Los Angeles Clippers, right? Who just brought in nothing but long wing players that can defend. Covington, Norman Powell, Kawhi Leonard, probably one of the best, if not the best, 3-and-D player out there. Paul George. Those are the kind of players you want depth in and a lot of. And I don't see a lot of that for the Heat. Now, I will say this, though, because it goes back to Jimmy Butler. We acknowledged early on that Jimmy Butler is the one player who's kind of above the rest, right? He's the guy who, he's their all-star. He's their stud. Somebody on this team has got to take that level and join Jimmy Butler, right? Somebody has got to be beta to his alpha. Somebody's got to be 1B to his 1A. Yeah. It could be Bam. It could be Tyler Hero. I don't know who it's going to be. It could be somebody we don't know. It could be who's the guy they drafted that sounds like Nikola Jokic?
Yeah, Nikola Jovic.
Nikola Jovic, right? It could be Nikola Jovic. We don't know. But somebody needs to step up because this team right now is the same team that played last year. And they were good last year, right?
Yeah.
I mean, they lost to Boston. Boston ultimately made it to the finals. I mean,
Look, the Heat were one shot away from making NBA Finals, basically.
A good team, undeniably. But the other teams in the East got better, and they didn't. So they didn't get better in the sense that they didn't bring anybody in.
Exactly.
So what's going to have to happen for this team is they're going to have to get better from within, right?
Yeah.
Bam is going to have to play better. He didn't play great down the stretch. You mentioned Robinson, right? The dude disappeared. I mean, Spo didn't even play him.
Yeah, and he was fully healthy.
Yeah, but he didn't get any playing time. So things have got to change. These guys, I love Oladipo. Depot could be the guy if he gets back to who he was finally after being 100% healthy. But somebody's going to have to take that next step up. Yeah. So their depth that you mentioned is great, and there's never anything wrong with depth. But they've got depth in an area that isn't particularly suited to wins in this NBA, right? In this NBA, you need to be a 3-point shooter and you need to defend, and you need to be long. And only a few of those guys really, I think, fit that mold.
Yeah. So before we go on and talk about the depth at the forward position, I also want to go back to Kyle Lowry for a second. Lost a lot of weight this offseason, and this is his second year with the Heat. Not that the first year should be an excuse, but he took a huge drop-off last season. I'm not going to say it was expected because I didn't expect it, but it was foreseeable because of his age. However, I expected him to play better than he did last year. That's not saying that it's going to be at the R-Star level we're used to seeing him at, but he has to play better than last year because, I mean, I actually hyped him up. I said he's very underrated last year. He didn't score a lot of points, but the amount of assists he dished out, he was basically a mini CP3, which is weird saying Kyle Lowry's a mini CP3 because they've always been at that same level. But last year, Kyle Lowry couldn't really score, but the way he dished out assists was very similar to Chris Paul. So I want to move on from that, but I did want to bring up Kyle Lowry. He is a star player. He's a future Hall of Famer. If he could get back to that level he was in Toronto, the Heat will have that alpha to the beta. Right, Jose? Because I think the way Kyle Lowry played in Toronto, you'd have Lowry and Jimmy Butler. That is not a Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant, but that is kind of as close as you could get to that. Personally.
All right. You're sounding a lot, and I might have upset a lot of East Coast Heat fans. Sorry. I'm going to go ahead and balance it out and upset some West Coast Laker fans now. You sound a lot like a Laker fan right now, all right? Laker fans are like, man, if LeBron could just be LeBron from 2006 plus AD plus Westbrook, if we could have Westbrook from 2012 plus LeBron from 06 plus AD from the Pelicans, we're unbeatable. And it's true, but you don't. You've got 2022, 23 LeBron, 23-24 LeBron, 23 LeBron AD, and 22-23 AD. And those guys are broken. I mean, that's probably a harsh word, but they're older. They're not who they were, man. Westbrook certainly looks broken. I mean, he doesn't even look interested in playing for this team. And so when I look at Lowry, I look at a 36-year-old point guard, man, and a phenomenal guy. His best years are behind him. He'd probably admit that too. And what you see generally with point guards is you see that drop off really quick. Yeah. Because when you lose the speed, when you lose the ability to be quick and cut and do the things that point guards need to do, you drop quickly, right? Whereas if you are a 6'10" power forward, you could lose a step, but you're still a 6'10" power forward. You could still, you could still do what Udonis Haslem is doing, right? You could still go in there and really in short spurts make an impact. But I think Kyle Lowry's best days are behind him. I don't see him returning to Toronto, Lowry. I do see him, being a great assist guy, because what happens generally when you get older, especially at the point guard position, is your vision gets better. The game really slows down. You see things that the young bucks don't, right? And so the ability to make that great pass, Lowry's going to do that. He's going to make the right decisions. He's smart. He's not going to make mistakes. But, we're not going to see who he was, man. Those days are behind him. And it's the same for CP. You brought up CP. I mean, he, as great as he is, his best days are behind him too.
Yeah. But it is intriguing that at his age, he's still trying to put the effort in to being Toronto Lowry, losing a lot of weight, because that was a concern last season. Not necessarily that was the excuse for playing bad, but the weight is always a concern in the NBA. Let's move on to the forward position. So, obviously, I said Bam Adebayo's at center. Caleb Martin at the 4 spot. But that could change, and I think it will change when we get to the middle of this season. First of all, if you guys don't know, I have a large love for...
Can I say it? Can I guess?
Yeah, you can guess.
Are we moving now to the center backup position?
Yes.
Let's see. Is it? Oh gosh, Omer Yurtseven?
Exactly. Jose knows, and you guys will know. You should know, but you will know. So Omer Yurtseven last year was a rookie. Really, really stepped up in the summer league. Summer league doesn't matter, right? But I noticed his skill level. I saw his skill set, and I said, wow, the Heat may have a star. Anyway, he got added to the active roster in the middle of the season. Bam Adebayo went down with an injury. He was out for about 10 games. Yurtseven came in, scored double-doubles almost every game. I think every single game that Bam was injured, and he tied some Heat record with Shaquille O'Neal. And I was impressed, man. And then when Bam came back, Yurtseven got limited minutes. And it wasn't because it was like a Duncan Robinson situation where he just wasn't good anymore. It was literally just because they didn't want to waste giving him a chance, even though it was the regular season. But now, a full off season, Yurtseven expects to be Miami's backup center. Dwayne Dedmon was Miami's number 2 center. But now it should be Yurtseven. And I think that there could be a chance that Yurtseven is not Miami's backup center. He might be the 4 for the Heat. That could be a case. Now, another case, the 4 could be Nikola Jovic. We touched on him a little bit ago. He is a rookie. He is not Nikola Jokic, but he could be. He's a big guy, and he could shoot. He is a guy that could be a 3-and-D player. He plays offense and defense, and that is very key. I think the 4 spot should play offense and defense, right? And right now, Caleb Martin is not that guy. And last year, PJ Tucker was really just defense, limited offense. He shot corner threes once in a while, but that was about it.
Yeah.
Nikola Jovic is that guy who could do offense and defense. Yurtseven, as much as I love him, I don't know about his offense. He can obviously drive in, but Jovic is the guy that has a jumper. And what intrigues me again is this depth for the Heat. They could fool around with this lineup, right? We know Bam's going to start. We know Lowry's going to start. And we know Butler's going to start. That's 3 out of 5. Hero could be questionable, right? Maybe you plug Robinson. Maybe you plug Oladipo in, right?
Sure.
And then the 4 is really questionable. Caleb Martin is not a starting caliber player in the NBA, especially for a team that's contending for the NBA Finals in the Heat. You want to see someone else besides Martin, unless he has a great season. So, Yurtseven or Jovic will likely be in that 4th spot at some point this season. I'm really excited about Yurtseven. I think he could be an all-star in the future. Jovic, I hope he's an all-star. I mean, he used a first-round pick on him, but it's really too early to discuss on that. So we touched on every single player for the Heat. I mean, we didn't touch on UD. We didn't touch on Jamal Cain, Haywood Highsmith, but they're going to get limited minutes. They're really players who are going to fill in for injured players, but those injured players are going to be bench players, right? Those players are not going to be the deciding players for a win or loss. So we touched on this whole Heat team, Jose, and now we're going to get to the part of our show where we discuss every single game of the season. Do you have the Heat? Yeah, do you have the Heat beating the Bulls on Wednesday? I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
But I will tell you, I feel for the Bulls. The Bulls had, and I don't want to go off track here.
No,
but
you're fine.
The Bulls had everything in place, man. They had Lonzo Ball. They had Caruso. DeMar DeRozan all of a sudden is resurrected. They look so good. Levine. And then it just all went off the deep end. I feel so bad for that team. And now it looks like, Ball might, he might be out for an extended period. I don't know, but that's rough.
Okay, so you're basically saying that the Heat are going to win game one. Perfect. That's what Heat fans
likely
wanted to
win
hear.
game one, yeah.
Hey, but no, I'm just kidding. We're not going to recap or preview every single game. I always do. I did that with the MLB too. When it comes to football, we do that because there's only a limited amount of games. So we're going to do instead a prediction for Miami's season.
Okay.
They're in the East.
Yeah.
They're in a conference with, boy, who knows, a reigning NBA champ. No, almost. Sorry. I don't like the Celtics, but whatever. The Celtics are the reigning Eastern Conference champs. You got the Milwaukee Bucks, who won it all 2 years ago, and they still have the one and only Greek Freak and obviously Chris Middleton.
Yep.
You have the Philadelphia 76ers, who still have James Harden and Joel Embiid. They are forces. Then you have let's say the revamped Brooklyn Nets. You say revamped. I think that Ben Simmons, especially what he's shown in the preseason, is going to be so key. I know he's hated, but his defense is just so good. It's a game changer. So that's a big three. Simmons, Kyrie, and Durant, if they stay healthy, and hopefully COVID is not a reoccurrence because we know Kyrie struggled with that last year.
Yeah.
The Raptors, who knows what they're up to? Scotty Barnes did well last season. They still have Siakam. They still have Van Fleet. And the Chicago Bulls, you just touched on them. And the Atlanta Hawks, you can't sleep on them. They almost made it to the NBA Finals a couple of years ago with Trae Young. And now they have DeJounte Murray, who I know you always love talking with.
Love that guy.
From the Peach Basket about the Spurs. So we just touched on really the majority of the top teams in the Eastern Conference. I mean, both conferences are stacked, right? So it's really, it doesn't matter what conference you're in. But no, the Heat have some tough talent. I don't think it's a question whether they make the playoffs or not. But advancing past the first round, the second round, making the NBA Finals, is that a concern for the Heat?
Making the NBA Finals is for sure. I think as currently constructed, they're not a finals contender. Not right now. Now, I think we were talking before we went live, but you talked about the trade deadline. A lot could change, especially for this team at the trade deadline. So I don't know that this is the team we'll see, right? In February, it might be totally different. Likely will. What's interesting about the teams you rattled off, we didn't even bring up the Cleveland Cavaliers that have Donovan Mitchell right now. So many teams got better, but when I look at the East, it's Atlantic Division heavy, right? You rattle off almost all of those teams: the Celtics, the Sixers, the Raptors, the Nets. You didn't mention the Knicks, who played pretty good. I don't think the Knicks are a challenge, but that's all Atlantic Division, right?
Yeah.
I think the Heat will. They're going to win the Southeast. They're going to win their division, which really doesn't matter. But when you look at the East, there's so many good teams, right? Boston got better. They obviously have got some drama with their coach. It's going to be weird to see. I think it's all played out, but how they come back from that. But that's still a very good team that beat the Heat in the Eastern Conference Finals. The Sixers, you touched on it a little bit. It's a bit of a mystery. The Nets, to me, also a bit of a mystery. I think the biggest concern,
but it's a good mystery, right? We'll make that clear.
I don't know, man. It could go either way. I mean,
they have the talent, though, right?
He's a good player, and if you just look at the talent, he's a great fit, right? But I just worry so much about the toxicity of players like Harden. And Simmons, right? Who wanted to be out, and then they were out. Now they're somewhere else, and there's this whole grass is always greener thing that rarely works out, right? You get where you want to be, and then you realize, man, I don't like it here either, right?
Yeah.
And we've seen that in Harden's career, right?
And luckily, the Heat, because I know it's a Heat preview show, they haven't had that drama in years.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, and that's one of the things I love about the Heat. They're consistent, and that's why they stay really good when they probably shouldn't be as good as you might expect on paper. But getting back to it, I think that the biggest concerns for the Heat are going to be the Celtics again and the Bucks. I think the Bucks are going to be good. Celtics are going to be good. The Sixers, to me, and the Nets are a tier below. I think the Heat, the Celtics, and the Bucks are probably the cream of the crop in the East right now, as it stands. But when I look at those three top tier teams, the Heat are the number three team. I
Okay.
think the Celtics are a little bit better than them. I think the Bucks are a little bit better than them. But again, that's going into the season. That's not a bad place to be at the start of the season. A lot's going to change. I guarantee you that this will not be the same team. When we have this conversation in February, it'll be a different team. So we'll see where that ends up. But I think this team does not, as presently constructed, is not a finals team. Their top, the top ceiling for them would be Eastern Conference Finals, like it was last season. I think that's it. And even that, I think right now would be a bit of a stretch.
Truthfully, the Heat have one of the best playoff players, Jimmy Butler. It doesn't matter how many points he averages in the regular season. In the playoffs, you know he's going to average more, way more. My concern is not going to be with Bam Adebayo for the first time in a while. Bam Adebayo always wastes his athleticism. He has it. He's tall, he's strong, he's fast for a center, but he never seems to use that athleticism to his advantage. However, the Heat finally have depth at the forward position where if Bam has some off games, they will be fine, right? My concerns are still going to be with Kyle Lowry and Victor
Yeah.
Oladipo, but at the forward position, we finally do not have concerns. Nikola Jovic, I know he's only a rookie, but I think he is very, very good, and he's going to be very effective for the Heat. I know he's a rookie, but he's going to be better than Dwayne Dedmon was last year, right? I mean, Dedmon was a bad backup center. Nothing against him, but Dedmon just wasn't fast, wasn't aggressive. He was just there to be a backup center, right? And I feel like Jovic has more to play for defensively and offensively. So for me, yes, the Nets are a tier below the Heat. The Sixers, I don't know. I feel like they might be at the same level as the Heat, which is weird because you said they're below, and I'm a Heat fan. But yeah, the Bucks and Celtics are definitely going to give us problems. But again, that's just seeding wise. I think in the playoffs, the Heat are a different breed. What it's going to come down to is, yes, of course, the trade deadline, but that involves every single team. So when you're, doing a season preview before game one of the season, you can't bring up the trade deadline. So what do you have to bring up? The Heat coaching staff is terrific. Do I think Kyle Lowry is going to be better than he was last year? Yes. Do I think Tyler Hero is going to be better than last year? No. I think he's going to be the same, and that's good. Duncan Robinson, he has to be better than last year, even if it's just on the defensive end. Butler, who knows? It doesn't matter. I mean, he's still a star player. The playoffs are there. Bam, again, he finally has depth. Maybe that will help him, right? Maybe he won't feel as much pressure, right? So that's basically it. I think that the Heat have the star players. Hero, Butler, Bam, Yurtseven. Larry may not be a star anymore, but the veteran presence is there. Like you said, he makes no mistakes.
Yep.
So, again, these are just predictions. I do have the Heat making the NBA Finals. Whether they win, I don't know. There's some very good teams in the West, as usual, because, you could look at it on paper. The Suns are still there. The Grizzlies are still there. Golden State's still there. The Lakers, I don't know. I think they're going to be good this year. The Heat can't worry about the West. They really have to worry about themselves.
100%.
I really think they have to worry about themselves. They can't worry about the Celtics. They just have to make the playoffs and hope for the best. I think the trade deadline could be key for this Heat team. Yes, it's key for every team, but the Heat seem, whether they make a move or not, I don't know, but they always seem to be heavily involved, right? 2 years ago, they tried to get Lowry at the deadline. They didn't, but it was a heavy push, right? They actually got Oladipo at the deadline 2 years ago. Last year was a concern. I thought they were going to get a big man like Drummond or DeMarcus Cousins. but they didn't. But again, this year we finally have depth at that center and forward position, and that's why I think that's going to be, the highlight of this show, that the Heat heading into the season finally have help at the forward position. So that's basically it. We just previewed, I think, in a quick manner, really the Heat's upcoming season. We really touched on everything. We could add in a few more things. It's going to be UD's final season. Yeah, we really touched on everything, Jose. Any final thoughts about this Miami Heat team?
Just to wrap it up, I think you're right. This team is one player away. They get that player at the trade deadline, it changes everything. But as currently constructed, I think they're falling a little bit below, what your expectation are, in my humble opinion.
Yes. Okay. No, and I understand, because you have lower expectations for Larry than me, and if that's true, it lines up. So it's completely understandable. It's like a mathematical equation, right? I have Larry being better, I have the Heat being better. You have Larry being worse, and so you have the Heat being worse. And that matters. A starting point guard is huge for any team. And yeah, that's basically it. The Heat are going to be an amazing team this year. We'll see what happens in the playoffs, but that's a while away. I'm just glad myself, Isaac Edelman, and Jose got to sit down here on FL Teams to preview the upcoming season. The Heat's first game is on Wednesday night against the Chicago Bulls. The NBA season starts Tuesday night. Golden State versus the Lakers. That's going to be some game. And again, I just want to give a quick plug to our partners here at FLTeams.com. The peachbasket.net. Jose runs a fantastic site covering all things NBA related. It's passionate NBA fans. It's the voice of the fan, right, Jose? It's fans just dedicated to watching the NBA, covering the NBA, and just breaking down basketball. And I think the game of basketball is getting better every year, whether it's new players, new style of play, right? As you alluded to earlier in the show, it's just more shooting oriented. Yeah. Every Saturday night, we'll have NBA Week in Review. I'll be on that show. Jose will be on that show. That's a show where we recap the weeks or the week in the NBA. So thanks so much, Jose, for coming on here. Everyone, make sure to check out the peachbasket.net, an amazing site, and make sure to check out FLTeams.com.